Evening. I'm speaking to you. We are from California, San Rafael. That's about 20 miles or so north of San Francisco. And my name is Ayya Santacitta, and I'm originally from Austria. And I trained in the Ajahn Chah lineage for many years, and I know Shirley, who is here today, from the time in Amaravati when I arrived as a laywoman in 1992, a long time ago. And during that time, I also met Venerable Chanda. She's coming sometimes visiting Amaravati. And that's how, we had developed a friendship. And then Venerable Chanda came to our monastery in America for 2 times, I think. And so I'm happy to help out during the Vasa while Venerable Chanda is on retreat. And I'm speaking to you from the Aloka Earth Room. And I'll ask Matthias to put a link into the chat. So maybe afterwards, if you're interested, you can check that out a little bit. And, it's a place particularly dedicated to bringing together earth awareness and the teachings of the Buddha, in kind of these very challenging times, where we're becoming increasingly aware that the way how we are conducting life isn't really that great, and is not sustainable, really. So, and it seems to be very difficult for us, to stay with that truth because it's very scary. And the mind comes up with all kinds of strategies, to distract itself. And these, distractions, they can also be an initial calling forth of mindfulness, because as soon as we are noticing that we are caught in thinking patterns, we could as well, become aware of that and identify them as just simply thinking patterns. And then, from there, noticing the aversion or the fear or the sense of, not wanting, which is actually fueling the going into distractions or going into habitual ways of thinking we are used to, and that's how we define ourselves. And there's a whole, body of teaching in the Buddha's dispensation, which is called the teaching on the 5 hindrances, the 5 nivarana. I'm quite sure you've all heard about it, and for sure also experienced them in your own mind. And that's what I would like to speak about today, about the 5 nivarana. And the word nivarana, if we translate that directly, means wrong wanderings. When the mind wanders down the wrong path, because it's not leading to liberation, it's not leading to insight, it's just leading into more and more fortifying old patterns of thinking. So that's, the theme of today's reflection. And then there will be a guided meditation afterwards, giving us an opportunity to directly experience that kind of practice. And for now, I just want to give us a few minutes to land here, settle in. And, if there's anyone who'd like to write something in the chat, if there's anything we need to know, if that helps you to land here more fully, please write it into the chat. And otherwise, just taking in with whom you are here today. And also, sensing into yourself, what are you bringing to this meeting? Are you tired? Are you excited? Are you just like kind of quite spacious? Whatever it is, just knowing that. And, allowing the breath to take you into the body and come here to join us for this 1.5 hours of Dhamma. And whoever can have their camera on, I really appreciate it. Makes it much easier for me to teach if I can see who is there. It's kind of a call and response. If I only have to teach at black little boxes, it's much more difficult with anything to come out. If there's nobody there, then nope, nothing is coming. So it's a co-creation, It's not just like me entertaining you with some Dhamma, but it's something we are doing together. By you showing up and I'm showing up too. So sensing your body and then the weight of the body on the cushion on the chair, the sense of gravity, which gently keeps you in place. And I'm somehow going to speak about the theme of that the obstacles are the path. The obstacles are not in the way, but they are the way. Like one obstacle after the next, and if we really engage, the path becomes visible. If we just meet it with aversion, wanting it to not be there, it's not possible to learn anything from it. And it's just like training ourselves in aversion. That's not really what this path is all about. But it's training ourselves in opening and being in relationship to what is arising, really. If we like it or not, that is really not the point of the practice. It's just one bit of information, I like it, I don't like it, but it has not much other importance in terms of liberation and in terms of, wisdom and compassion. We still need to relate and engage in order to transform and integrate the lessons, which are coming from engaging with what's happening in our lives. Because in the beginning, it can be a bit of a misunderstanding, thinking meditation is all about retreating from life and going into a small box and then just meditating in that box. That's not it. And monastic life is also not like that. That's what people think, coming to the monastery is just, retreating from life and not having to engage with the messiness, of embodied existence, but it's not like that. And I really like that saying of Thich Nhat Hanh, no mud, no lotus. So if there's no mud, if there's no mess, then there is not the beauty, of the opening of the mind like a lotus. And there are quite a few Buddha statues, are depicting the Buddha sitting on a lotus. And that's a symbol for the enlightened mind, the mind fully blossomed like a lotus, which comes through the muddiness of the lake, of the bottom of the lake, and then slowly it grows towards the light, and then comes out of the water and starts to blossom. And all of the trials and tribulations on the way, make it so, make the blossoming possible. Without it, it would just not have happened, because that's the training. And one way of we can get a handle on this is the 5 nivarana, the 5 hindrances in the Buddha's teaching. And the instructions would be to get a kind of a handle on what's going on in the mind by identifying which pattern is it. Because there's actually 5 patterns. And that's not a normal part of the conditioning of our culture, because we aren't really, instructed how to relate to these different patterns in the mind, like fear, and aversion or greed. We either learn to avoid it, or to override it, or just simply collapsing in overwhelm. That's the 3 patterns which, people often engage in without really knowing it. And then when we, come in touch with a teaching like this, we start to be able, to notice when a pattern like this has been triggered. And then if we are aware of it, then we are no longer caught in it. And that's the function of identifying, which of the hindrances is arisen, is to have a perspective on it. Because if I know that fear is there, or aversion or greed, then I'm no longer caught in it, at least in the moment where I notice it. And then I get maybe sucked into it again, and then pulling out, and sucked in and pulling out, and sucked in, pulling out. And as I do that, I become more and more aware that actually, I do have a choice. I can choose to just see it for what it is without becoming it. And that's the freedom we train in the Buddhist teaching, is to have that freedom to know what is happening rather than being it, being completely caught up in it, being completely identified with it. So that's the difference, between being the greedy person or knowing that greed is there. There's a huge difference. It feels unpleasant both ways, but one way is leading out of that suffering, and the other way is just making it deeper, making the ruts deeper. So we can choose, which one do we want to engage in. And so this teaching on the 5 hindrances, the nivaranas, offers a way to slow down enough to learn to identify the pattern with presence, mindfulness, awareness. And I'm just going to go a little bit into those 5. You probably have heard about it in the past, but I think it's a really timeless teaching we can't hear often enough. And there is a sutta where the Buddha is, coming up with 5 or 6, actually 6 very beautiful similes about these patterns, the 5 hindrances plus the mind free of the hindrances. So it's actually 6. And, we can imagine the mind is like the sky, and the patterns are like the clouds moving through the sky. And then, we can either try to grasp the clouds, or just allow the clouds to just do their business, just move. We don't need to grasp. And these 5 hindrances are in this one sutta, are depicted like bowls of water, which in the time of the Buddha, they were used, instead of a mirror to see. If you have put some kind of a headgear on your head, you could see if it was on straight, by looking into the bowl of water and seeing your contours in it. And so they were kind of a ancient form of a mirror. And so the first, bowl of water would be a bowl of water mixed in with different dyes, yellow, red, and blue. And then if a person, would examine their own, head and headgear by looking into that bowl of water, everything would be dyed in red, yellow, and blue. And that he compared that with sensual lust, kamachanda. So if there is, if sensual lust, if greed has arisen, then everything we look at through this lens of greed is warped, in that way. So if we look at something, through the lens of greed, it looks much more attractive than what it really is, if there is no greed, because we can see only the good things. We cannot see the full spectrum of it. So that would be the first one, the bowl of water, which is colored with different dyes. And then the next one is dullness and drowsiness, tinamida. And that's compared, with a bowl of water being covered over with water plants and algae. And again, it wouldn't be possible to see one's face very clearly in a water bowl covered over in this way. And then the next one is ill will or aversion, vyapada. And that is compared with a bowl of water boiling, bubbling, and there's lots of steam and heat coming off. And if you would want to see your face in it, it would be painful to the skin, and you wouldn't see anything because of the bubbling and because of the steam. And the next one is restlessness and remorse, uddhacca kukucca. And that's compared with a bowl of water steered by the wind or stirred by the wind. I'm not quite sure what's the right thing to say here. Rippling and swirling and churning into wavelets. And again, we wouldn't be able to see anything really well. And then the last one here of the 5 hindrances is vicikicca, doubt. And that's compared with a bowl of water that is turbid, unsettled, muddy, placed in the dark. And again, you won't be able to see. So that's the 5 hindrances. And then the last one would be the serene mind, samatha. And that is compared with a bowl of water that is clear, serene, limpid, set out in the light. And it perfectly reflects what's there. So this is the 5 hindrances plus the mind free of the hindrances. And I really think this is a very good way, how we can get a little bit of space around the pattern in the mind. Just enough space, to not be so completely convinced that this is who I am. But it's more, this is what has a reason because of causes and condition. And because it has a reason, it's going to cease at one point. And so if we stay engaged in this way, that makes the path visible. Because if we are not staying engaged, if we just slip into it and get carried away by it, then we are on wrong wanderings, what the word nivarana means. And we are wandering down the road of, if I would have only this, I would be happy ever after and it would be so great and blah. Or if I would only not have this, it would be so great, and all of the rest of it, you all know it. And by, slowing down enough to be able to identify which one of the 5 has been triggered, is enough space around it so that we can for a moment stop the momentum and then stop it again and stop it again and stop it again. And that's the path, to again and again and again and again and again step out of it. With a lot of softness and a lot of kindness, not with like, oh, you idiot, why you're doing this. This is just like a hindrance on top of the hindrance. But to do it with a lot of gentleness and compassion and, really allowing it to come close because there is not so much fear of it. And through that, we increase our porosity for insight to shine through. If we just meet it with a lot of anger on top of anger, then there is no insight is not possible. So it's the kindness and the gentleness with which we meet it is what allows for insight to emerge. Because otherwise it's just like a wall on top of it, which is suppression, really, not engagement. And, because we Westerners, most people here on the call are either, from the West or at least Western educated. We haven't been encouraged in that way. We haven't been encouraged to stay engaged with our experience on a level which isn't on the thinking level, but on a level which is more like a sensing and feeling and embodied way of engagement. And, and whatever we can't sense or feel, we have a tendency to overthink, because we just desperately try to make some sense. And instead of really sensing it with the being, we try to figure it out in the head, and that is often not possible. So, the deep Western cultural distrust into sensing and feeling, which is inbuilt in the way how we have been conditioned and educated, that's something to notice when we can. The overemphasis of the intellect, which can only handle so much complexity and then it has to give up, Like what we can see now, with what's called the polycrisis, nobody can get their head around all of this because it's impossible. It's not something which can be solved with the thinking mind, but it's a complete different way of engaging with life, which is asked for. Meaning dropping from the head into the body and relating to the planet as a subject, not as an object. That's at the center of the shift, which is needed for our species to continue to live here for much longer. To relate to the planet as a subject with intelligence and capacity to self-organize, not as an object we're going to dominate and extract from whatever we like. So in that way, it's a big deal to take that on, that teaching about engaging is the way to make the path visible, but not just engaging on an intellectual level, but engaging on a sensing and feeling level. Because we are not very confident on that level, because it isn't part of our conditioning. But we can learn it, like just anything else we have learned. Drive a car, writing and speaking and so on. We could learn all of that. That was pretty amazing. Why shouldn't we be able to learn the other thing too? No reason to assume that. So this, coming back to the beginning, And the word yoniso manasikara, you might have heard it, that actually means exactly that. Yoni means womb, the womb of a woman. So yoniso manasikara, which is often, translated as radical, thorough, or wise attention, can be also translated to coming back to the beginning, coming back to the womb before the intellect, puts like a whole story on top of it, and meeting it on the level of sensing and feeling, for what these bodies are equipped for. So, coming back to the beginning before we have been projecting like a whole big story on top of anything, which is often, the hindrances are different stories we spin because we don't want to engage on this energetic level because it's scary, And then we split the energy off in the head and go here until we notice it. And then and then it just come back down into the body. And then, I'm really scared, how that feels because I don't know what is it. And it's exactly, the capacity to tolerate that, not exactly knowing what it is, because words are only taking you that far, and then at one point we have to let go of the attachment to words and be in the direct experience. And that's, what then results in insight, which, comes forth as saddha, faith or trust, confidence in the path, and wisdom, panya. And then when we understand, if we want to continue and engage with the path, we have to let go of something. And by, really giving in to what we know already, for example, knowing that these patterns are hindrances, they're just sending us down the wrong path, and being willing to let go and act what we already know. And for that, we need experience, we need saddha, we need faith to really, enact what we already know to be true. Because it requires some kind of giving up, or renunciation. And that's exactly, what's scary to many of us, to let go of what we know, even if it's painful. It feels sometimes still a better deal, to be with that which is painful rather than to be in that openness, of the serene mind, which doesn't hold on to anything. And to tolerate that wide openness, the not knowing. And there's this very beautiful Zen saying, not knowing is most intimate. If we can't really label it, what it is exactly, there is a kind of presence, which is more intimate than if we think we know. It's more direct, it's more full. So, and wisdom and faith, or wisdom and trust in the path, they're going together. The more experience we have, the more faith comes forth, because we have seen that often enough that we have the courage, to let go into it and see what happens. And, when the hindrances are triggered, to really notice a hindrance has arisen and then not engage in it. By, coming back to the direct experience, how it feels in the body again and again. And then through that direct engagement, insight happens when causes and conditions are coming together. And we can only put causes and conditions in place. We can't control when insight arises, but we can definitely do something about causes and conditions by, practicing and listening to different talks and things and so on. So I think now it's time for going into a guided meditation and trying to bring that a little bit into our direct experience. So, find a posture you can sustain for 30 minutes. And just recollect the motivation which brought you here today or which brings you to those gatherings in general. Because there's many other things you could do. Why did you come? So there must be already a certain amount of faith there, a certain amount of conviction, confidence that this path has something to offer you. Otherwise, most likely you wouldn't have come here. So just noticing that. And then really, being with your mind and pointing it to the present moment experience. If it wants to wander off into some kind of thinking, some hindrance, just bringing it back. And, sensing your body as it is sitting here, the weight of the body. And you're staying with the simplicity of the embodied experience that needs a certain amount of energy to do that. So bringing that energy forth and not, projecting the energy into the thinking mind, but projecting it into the body. The sensing of the whole body, as it's sitting here and breathing in and breathing out. So sensing the body from inside and the aliveness of the body, the vibrancy of the body. Which is a direct extension of the body of the planet, which is kept alive through eating, drinking, and breathing every day, and can't really be separated from it. So meeting this earth body, human body, human has the same root as the word humus, which means earth. So these earthlings, which we are, having emerged out of the earth and being kept alive through eating, drinking, and breathing and going to the bathroom. That's the reality, of being an earthling. and to kind of relate and engage with that is a very important practice at this time. And to become more real about what it means to be embodied, rather than always, running around in the head, to just come back to the basics. And meeting it on that sensing and feeling level, which is very intimate and somehow like a bit unknown territory for us modern Westerners. Buried, under layers and layers of education, which are not really pointing towards the simplicity of embodiment, but about lots of other stuff, which is not really as fundamental for survival as that. So coming through this whole spiderweb, of stories and distractions, coming through to this direct experience of being a body or having a body, and the vulnerability of that reality, being so dependent, so utterly dependent on the modern human world. And starting to develop a relationship with it, a relationship of respect and relationship of interest. And coming down, coming down to the ground. That's why I called the session today Down to Earth Dhamma. Coming down to the earthiness of these human bodies. And the flow of in and out, in breath and out breath, and eating food and going to the bathroom, drinking water and going to the bathroom. The flow, where our bodies are just part of that flow. The water comes in through the tap, and then it comes out of our watershed, and then comes into our bodies, and then it goes into the bathroom, goes back into the watershed. So our bodies are part of the land. And the breathing, the breath, comes in, is produced, the oxygen, by plants and plankton, and then, comes out as CO2 and then is taken up by the plants and transformed back again. So this whole vast web of life, we are simply one little part of and not in control. That was just a dream which it's time now to let go and take an interest to what's really happening. As part of the Noble Eightfold Path in terms of right action, right livelihood, right speech. This paradigm shift, as we are moving out of the old paradigm of separability and, relating to the planet as an object rather than a subject with intelligence. And that is now coming online slowly, through the pressure of the polycrisis. This is the underlying issue, this assumed separability, which is just a delusion. So they're willingly engaging with that hospicing, of the old worldview and midwifing the new one, which is just starting to show some little beginnings. And we don't know what it is. And not knowing is most intimate. Being willing to relate with something which we don't really know yet what it is. Like, you maybe if you've had a baby, you already know the baby is in there, but you don't know who or she is really. There's this kind of relating to something which is emerging. There's a sense of receptivity and softness. And refraining, from trying to pin it down prematurely. But training the softening and the receptivity. Rather than fracturing, into polarization and projecting the fear onto some other people or some other countries or some other whatever. And I'm speaking here, sitting in America, where it's particularly crazy in that regard at this point. And then there's other places like Gaza or Ukraine, Sudan, where there's like really very crazy things going on. And that's the hindrances in full crazy bloom, That's how far it can get if we don't rein it in, if we don't engage in it when it begins and let it go on, for generations. It can become really very, very violent and crazy. Very difficult to come back from there. These wrong wanderings of the mind which is afraid of direct engagement on this sensing and feeling level. So, and for the remainder, I just let you sit on your own now for another 15 minutes. Just trying, to come back to the body and sense and feel the aliveness of the body. And whenever the mind wanders off into thinking about something, as soon as you're noticing it, coming back to sensing and feeling. The aliveness, the embodiment, the earth body. In a few minutes, I'm gonna ring the bell. And please take your time to come back into the community, into the group. And then we have like about 20 minutes if you'd like to share something or clarify something, ask something. Then you could either write in the chat or you could raise your Zoom hand and Manori is gonna unmute you. And Matthias has put some links into the chat, to my own place, to the Aloka Earth Room, if you want to look at that at another point. And there's also a link to online teachings I give every Wednesday and your evening, and Shirley is quite sometimes part of that, and other people from Europe. So it's in the evening in Europe, in the morning in America. And on those Wednesdays, the teachings are called Earthworm Practice for the Anthropocene. So that's a teaching, which is especially like a weaving together, bringing together of earth awareness and Buddha Dhamma. And here's David. Please, David, let us know.
I will unmute David, Ayya.
Yes, please do.
Thank you for the talk and the meditation. It's just kind of a more of a comment. I just find it so amazing that there's always something in a Dharma talk that I can kind of relate to. It's almost kind of, maybe it's the timeless quality or just how clever the Buddha teachings were. But yeah, there's just kind of always something that's relevant to everything that's going on with life. It's quite impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it was clever. It was rather wise,
Yes. Yeah.
And because it's a timeless truth, of course, it can be related to anything, anytime, And I think, all of the great wisdom teachings have that quality, not only the teachings of the Buddha. And it depends very much on the teacher, who is emphasizing what, isn't it? Some teachers emphasize more like the traditional, kind of more conservative elements of the teachings, and others emphasize more contemporary elements. It's very much depends on the teacher and what the teacher thinks is important to emphasize. But the Buddha's teaching are extremely versatile, yeah.
Thank you.
and daughter. Do you think we know each other from Amaravati, huh? From like 1 million years ago, right?
Yes, that's why I was waving at you earlier.
Yeah.
So just to say I'm here. Well, it's
Hello.
very nice to see you again. I'm reflecting on the teachings of this evening of moving from the head to the body and what it you seem to have this emphasis of relationship with the earth, and I work in sustainability, and it feels like a systemic change, the whole meditation, because there's a moving, and it's looking at, when you talk about it, the earth being object or something subjective. It's like it moves from something not living to something living.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Something which isn't alive, and doesn't have intelligence, to something which has, a self-organizing intelligence. It is an actor, and not an object. Yeah. And
But
that seems to be the shift, which is which is coming on now, for us. But it's just in the beginning, and so it's quite confusing.
yeah, so what sort of like in terms of the meditation, then for us as people, that sort of moving from the head into the body and showing up with this, you call it meeting obstacles with kindness, and I can't remember the other words you used, like
Engagement.
engagement,
Yeah.
engagement. And so that's it's just that I can, it's the earth shift is clear, but the human shift is a bit unclear to me, like what that is. And maybe I'm trying to solve it with the mind, and you tell me not to solve it with the mind, but it's like, because we are a living system as well ourselves. And I guess if we move from the head to the body, then that creates more like aliveness in us,
Right.
and we connect more with our true nature, and therefore we can connect better with nature as true nature.
Yeah.
That's kind of just the observation, the experience from this today.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You got it. So because if you're not kind of endlessly wandering in the thinking mind, but go into direct sensing relationship with your body, because your body is part of the body of the earth. You are just a small cell inside of the earth.
Mm.
And then when you're more in touch with your body, you are more in touch with the larger body of the earth. And then the aliveness is the way how the communication is happening. It's not the earth is not whispering something in your ear saying, "Hey, daughter, do this." But it's more like it's a rewiring, on a
Yeah.
neural level, a rewiring, and then that takes care that thinking, doing, and speaking will change from the bottom up. This is why it's called down to earth Dhamma. Because rather than you kind of training yourself to think differently, you're training yourself to not think and just be in direct sensorial contact with the data flow which comes from the vaster body of the earth, and you experience it in your energy body as a vibrancy.
Mm. Okay.
And it's just a body awareness, with a more contemporary background, in regards to what's happening right here with the poly crisis, which is mainly a crisis of resources running out, because we have already extracted everything under the sun we could extract, and now it's starting not to work anymore. Several of the planetary boundaries have already been crossed. So we're going towards the abyss, basically, as a species.
Mm.
So we need to come back to the reality of what it means to be alive. Need to eat, drink, and breathe, because that's the basics. And we were like concerned with so many things, but not with the basics for so long, for hundreds of years. With what else could we buy on Amazon, and all of those things which are really not very, very basic enough. And then there has so much has been overlooked for so long. And now suddenly it all comes into focus. With the crisis, which is mainly a fighting for what's left.
Mm.
And then in some places on the planet, it is extremely intense, like in Gaza, for example, where a whole population is starved, with the whole world looking and not knowing what to do, because it's such an entanglement of madness that something like that can happen.
Mm.
So that means, that the whole system is no longer working. If that can happen with us all looking and not knowing what to do, because there's so much trauma and so much ancestral materials which are not metabolized, that there's so much
Yeah.
madness going on. So that means, if it can't be solved in the head, which it obviously can't, otherwise it would have. So then you need to go to where the neural pathways are actually located, in the body, in the mind, in the brain, but also throughout the whole body. The way how we think and what we consider to be good and bad is very much conditioned, over generations. And you can't just like think your way out of it. It's much too intense. This is why there's so many somatic practices now, so much emphasis on the somatics, because that has already been understood. And the Buddha's teaching is very powerful, but to be able to really live in that way, you need to kind of learn to interrupt these patterns, with a lot of kindness, and come back and reactivate the sensing and feeling again. Because when things are extremely complex, that is a much better way of maneuvering, of making sense, not just on the cognitive level, but with the whole being. Does that make sense, Dorte?
Yes, and I also want to apologize. I was a little distracted because when you're talking about systems and living systems, my cat found it so interesting that he joined in. So,
That he did what?
no, just as we were talking about the living system and connecting with nature and everything, my cat joined in, and he had to. That's why I moved away. I just had to help him for a little while. So, no, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, so I'm happy, I feel very honored that the cat also chimed in, because I really trust the more than human intelligence is to be able to help us out here, because we are so kind of determined that we know everything better. It's a real obstacle for us, Yeah. So when a cat thinks it's a good thing, then that means a lot to me. Thank you.
He won't leave me alone. I have to stroke his back.
What is his name?
It's called Romeo. Come up, Romeo. Come up and say hello. Come up. Come up. Yeah, there you go. Say
Oh,
hello.
hi.
Yeah. You say hello. Yeah, so just when you were speaking, he jumped through the window. So that's why I stepped away a little while. See here.
Yeah, he's lovely. Hello.
He says,
Okay.
So it's a kind of aliveness. It helps with the aliveness, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And Joseph.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. That came at a very opportune time.
Uh-huh.
Because I think I've got a handle. It's so easily to be overwhelmed, to be full of despair,
Uh-huh.
and that looking at those hindrances and looking at the meaning behind them, it's very good that we have these sessions where we can turn to our sort of teachers and like yourself, who's got years of practice, to give us sort of guidance.
Yeah.
Yes, come at a very opportune time. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Amina.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for the Dhamma. And hello, everyone. I'm in the UK, in London. And I wonder if I can play devil's advocate a little bit. Because in my experience with the practice, I understand mindfulness of the body is important. But I find the problem isn't that I'm thinking, it's that I'm not thinking clearly. And I'm not perceiving the nature of my experience clearly and how it's constructed and biased and distorted all the time. But I find thinking isn't the only problem. It's thinking wrongly.
Yeah, that's what I was speaking, when I spoke about the Nivarana is those patterns, but in order to think clearly, you first need to ground yourself in the body. And once, there is a sufficient groundedness, then you can come back to contemplating, and so on. But first you need to have enough resilience, to actually know what the difference is,
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
The intellect per se isn't like that bad, but it can't be the leader of the show, It needs to be the servant, of what is seen in the direct experience, which isn't really coming through thinking. But then afterwards, you can use the thinking in a much clearer way once you've had some insight,
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I wasn't saying it just in response to what you were saying, but just also just noticing sometimes in spiritual spaces the thinking is vilified, and that didn't feel right to me. And at one point, I sort of had to reclaim that no, actually, I'm an intelligent woman from the global South. My thinking is helpful usually. So yeah, I just wanted to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for clarifying and extending.
But thinking in a bigger way, not being imprisoned inside of those hindrances, but being able to see a larger context. The thinking which comes from that, yeah, totally, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's time, I hand over to Manori. So thank you so much for inviting me, and all the best, and maybe I see you again sometimes next year.
Yeah, thank you very
Goodbye.
much, Ayya. And
Yes.
it was such a wonderful talk, and the meditation practice, bit different to what we normally do, which is really nice and opened up. And so you have got the Aloka Vihara link earlier. So through the Aloka Vihara link or through Anukampa project, we can practice this beautiful quality of generosity. And I want to tell a few words about the generosity, about dana. Giving develops the wholesome qualities that form the foundation of our Dhamma practice. And generosity can also be practiced of checking it will be a practice of checking in deeply with us. So here at Anukampa and also with Aloka Vihara, we offer several ways of cultivating this beautiful quality of giving. And at Anukampa, there is this financial donation of any amount through the anukampaproject.org/donate link, which is in the chat now. And if you're financially able, you can do standing orders. And once Venerable Chanda returns from the Vasa, there is more other opportunities like meals. Even in Aloka Vihara, you can see under support tab, you can see 3 ways of supporting. And there is, if you are able to do any volunteering and if you have any special talents that you can share with Anukampa, please contact team at anukampaproject.org. And thank you very much for coming and being part of Anukampa community. And thank you again, Ayya. It is such wonderful thing to have you again this year.